My mother was the one that I had almost the most trauma about, interestingly enough, because she was my primary caregiver and I was with her all of the time. So I felt unprotected at times.
For 40 years, Goldie Hawn has sold us the ultimate Hollywood fairy tale. We see the forever romance with Kurt Russell and the perfect happy family. But what if this masterpiece is actually a forgery? Beneath the giggles and the glamour lies a ghost, a father who claims he never abandoned his children, but was systematically erased. This isn't just a story about a celebrity breakup. It is a story about a woman who used her immense power to manipulate the media, rewrite history, and destroy a man just to keep her image spotless. To understand how we got here, we have to rewind the tape back to the mid-1970s. Goldie Hawn was not just a star, she was a phenomenon. She had already won an Academy Award for Cactus Flower and had charmed the world as the dizzy blonde on Laugh-In. She was America's sweetheart. But in 1975, on a flight from New York to Los Angeles, she met a man named Bill Hudson. Bill wasn't a nobody. He was part of the Hudson Brothers, a musical trio that had their own primetime TV show and teenage girls screaming their names. They were pop idols. When they met in that first-class cabin, the chemistry was instantaneous and volatile. They fell in love hard and fast. They married in 1976, and for a brief moment, they were Hollywood royalty. Goldie was pregnant with their son Oliver, and soon after came Kate. On the surface, it looked like the start of a dynasty. They bought a massive house in Malibu, they threw parties, and they lived the high life. But behind closed doors, the power dynamic was shifting. Goldie was becoming a titan of the industry, transitioning from an actress to a producer, a woman who wanted control over her career and her life. Bill, while successful, was starting to see his band's popularity wane, and in Hollywood, the person with the bigger box office draw usually holds the gavel. But wait, this next part changes everything about the victim narrative Goldie often plays. In 1979, Goldie wanted an open marriage. This wasn't a rumor, it was a request. She famously said in interviews later that she was built for freedom, not suffocation. While still married to Bill, she began an affair with a French actor named Yves Renier. And this wasn't just a fling, she effectively left her family behind in California to follow this man to Paris. There are reports from that time of Bill struggling to manage 2 toddlers while his wife was living out a romantic fantasy across the ocean. When she eventually returned, she didn't come back begging for forgiveness. She came back wanting a divorce. The divorce proceedings in 1980 were ugly, but they were the first crack in the foundation. Goldie wanted a clean break. She agreed to pay Bill a settlement, money she had earned from her massive film hits. But in exchange, she got the house in Malibu. This is crucial, because that house was the children's home. By keeping the house, she kept the environment. Bill moved into a smaller beach house nearby, determined to co-parent. At this point, things were tense, but they were still functioning parents. Bill was seeing the kids, he was in their lives. But then, Goldie made a movie called Swing Shift, and on that set, she reconnected with a rugged, charismatic actor named Kurt Russell. This is where the mythology begins. The story we are all told is that Kurt swooped in and saved the day, becoming the father figure the children never had because their biological father had disappeared. But let me tell you this, the timeline tells a different story. When Kurt moved in, the walls around the family unit began to get higher. According to Bill, this was when the gatekeeping started. He claims that when he would call the house to speak to Oliver or Kate, they were told they were busy, or sleeping, or out. When he would drive over to pick them up for his scheduled visitation days, nobody would be home. The locks were changed. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. Goldie was a master of the press. She gave interviews painting herself as the struggling single mom doing it all, even though she was a multi-millionaire with a live-in partner. She began to refer to Kurt as the kid's pa. Imagine the psychological impact of that on a biological father who's living 3 miles away and fighting to see his children. It creates a villain where there might not have been one. The public ate it up. They loved Goldie. They loved Kurt. And if they loved Goldie and Kurt, then Bill Hudson had to be the bad guy. He was cast in the role of the deadbeat dad, not because he wasn't paying or wasn't trying, but because he didn't fit the new script. But it gets crazier. In the midst of this Cold War, Goldie Hawn's career was skyrocketing. She was producing Private Benjamin, becoming one of the most powerful women in entertainment. She had the money to hire the best lawyers in the state. Bill, meanwhile, was watching his music royalties dry up. He couldn't compete in court. He spent his savings fighting for custody, fighting for visitation, but every time he got a court order, he claims Goldie would find a way around it. She would take the kids to a film location in another state for months at a time. How do you enforce visitation when the mother and kids are in Colorado or New York and you are broke in Los Angeles? You can't. You slowly fade into the background. The years rolled on and the erasure became almost total. Kate and Oliver became teenagers, then young adults, and they began to enter the entertainment industry themselves. And in every interview, every red carpet appearance, they praised Kurt Russell. They called him Dad. They spoke about how he was the one who was there. Bill Hudson was rarely mentioned, and if he was, it was with a vague sense of abandonment. The public accepted this as fact. Why would the lovely Goldie Hawn lie? Why would these charming kids lie? But we need to look at the psychology of the enmeshed family. Goldie Hawn is known for being incredibly close to her children. Some might say too close. There's a concept in psychology where a parent, often after a divorce, relies on their children for emotional fulfillment and demands absolute loyalty. If you're a child in that environment and you see your mother as the source of all love, money, and security, and you see her fighting with your father, who do you side with? You side with the winner. You side with the one who controls the narrative. To be part of Team Goldie meant rejecting Team Bill. It was a survival mechanism for the kids. And here's where it gets wild. For decades, Bill stayed relatively silent. He wrote a book, he gave a few interviews, but he largely took the punches. He watched his daughter become a superstar and thank Kurt in her acceptance speeches. He watched his son become a successful actor. He was a ghost, but the tension was building. It was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. And exploded did on a random Sunday in June 2015. It was Father's Day. By this point, social media was the new battleground. Oliver Hudson, then a grown man with children of his own, went on Instagram. He dug up an old photo from the family album, a picture of him and his sister Kate as young children with their biological father Bill Hudson. It looked like a happy memory, but the caption he wrote under it sent shockwaves through Hollywood. He wrote just 5 words, "Happy Abandonment Day." The internet broke. It was a brutal public slap in the face. It confirmed everything the public had suspected, that Bill was a monster who had walked away. But for Bill Hudson, this was the final straw. Something inside him snapped. He gave a blistering interview to the Daily Mail that week. He didn't hold back. He said, "I say to them now, I set you free. I had 5 birth children, but I now consider myself a father of 3. I no longer recognize Oliver and Kate as my own." He went on to say, "I would ask them to stop using the Hudson name. They are no longer a part of my life."
You thought that was big? Try this. Bill laid out his version of events in forensic detail. He described the parental alienation. He described how Goldie had systematically turned the children against him to create a perfect unit with Kurt. He called Goldie manipulative and controlling, a woman who needed to be the center of attention and needed to be the hero of her own story. He claimed that the abandonment was a lie manufactured to sell movies and magazines. He said Goldie wanted to create this myth of a perfect family with Kurt, and she wanted me out of the picture. This was a PR disaster for the Hawn-Hudson clan, or it should have been. But their armor was too thick. They largely ignored him. They let him look like the angry, bitter ex-husband. The media cycle moved on. The Happy Abandonment Day post stayed up. The narrative held. Goldie Hawn was still the saint. Bill Hudson was still the sinner. But what if I told you that the cracks are starting to show from the inside? Fast forward to 2024. Oliver Hudson and his sister Kate started a podcast called Sibling Revelry. It's a lighthearted show, usually, but recently, Oliver has been getting surprisingly honest about his childhood. And the picture he paints isn't the sunny, carefree life we imagined. He spoke about suffering from severe anxiety and trauma as a child. But the source of the trauma wasn't his absent father, it was his mother. Oliver admitted that he felt unprotected by Goldie. He described a childhood where his mother was constantly working, constantly traveling, and focused on her own life and her new relationship. He said he felt like an afterthought. He talked about the instability of being dragged from movie set to movie set, of never having a consistent routine. He even admitted to feeling a sense of trauma from his mother's lifestyle. This is a massive deviation from the script. For 40 years, the story was that Bill caused the trauma by leaving. Now Oliver is suggesting that the trauma came from the chaotic, high-flying lifestyle of the mother who stayed. This forces us to reevaluate the open marriage comments Goldie made decades ago. Goldie has always been a free spirit. She has said openly that monogamy is a difficult order and that she and Kurt are together because they choose to be every day, not because of a piece of paper. That sounds romantic. But apply that philosophy to parenting. A free spirit who values personal freedom and spontaneity above all else might not be the most stable anchor for a child who just went through a divorce. If Goldie was prioritizing her freedom and her new romance with Kurt in those crucial early years, it aligns with Oliver's feelings of being unprotected. Let's look at the financial aspect again, because in Hollywood, follow the money is always good advice. The Hawn Hudson brand is a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Their likability is their currency. If the public realized that Goldie Hawn was actually a ruthless gatekeeper who used her wealth to alienate a father from his children, that currency would devalue. The perfect blended family is a selling point. It helps promote their movies, their vodka brands, their clothing lines. Maintaining the villain status of Bill Hudson is a business decision as much as a personal one. There is also the matter of Kurt Russell. Kurt is, by all accounts, a decent guy, but he was also a young actor in love with a superstar. When he entered the picture, he stepped into a role that was written for him. Did he actively try to push Bill out, or did he just passively allow it to happen because it was easier? There was a quote from Bill where he says, "Kurt is a nice guy, but he's weak. He does whatever Goldie tells him to do." This paints a picture of Goldie as the puppet master, pulling the strings of the men in her life to ensure she gets exactly the scene she wants. Let's dig deeper into the Goldie the Manipulator theory. Consider her public persona, the ditz, the giggler. This is a classic disarming tactic. In psychology, playing the naive innocent is a powerful way to deflect criticism. If you are cute and funny, people don't suspect you of being Machiavellian. People don't suspect you of calculating legal maneuvers to strip a father from his visitation rights. It is the perfect camouflage. While everyone was laughing at her jokes on talk shows, she was allegedly orchestrating a complete rewrite of her children's genealogy. And the story isn't over. Recently, there has been a thawing of the ice. Oliver has started communicating with Bill again. They have exchanged texts. Oliver has admitted that his abandonment post was perhaps too harsh, a result of his own dark humor rather than pure hatred. He has acknowledged that the story is more complicated than Dad left. This subtle shift is terrifying for the narrative Goldie built. If the kids reconcile with Bill, if they admit that actually Dad tried but Mom made it impossible, the entire house of cards collapses. The Goldie Hawn story is a masterclass in image management. It teaches us that history is written by the victors, and in Hollywood, the victor is the one with the best publicist and the most box office clout. Bill Hudson never stood a chance. He was fighting a war against a woman who had America wrapped around her finger. He was shouting into a void while she was charming the world on Oprah. But let me ask you this. Who is the real victim here? Is it Bill, who lost his children? Is it Goldie, who perhaps really did feel abandoned and did what she thought was best? Or is it Oliver and Kate, who were used as pawns in a high-stakes game of celebrity chess? They grew up in a golden cage, surrounded by luxury and love, but built on a foundation of a half-truth. It's easy to look at Goldie Hawn and see the light. She is radiant. She promotes mental health through her mind-up foundation.
She preaches kindness. And maybe she believes her own story. The most effective manipulators often do. They convince themselves that their actions are righteous, that they are protecting their nest, that the ends justify the means. Goldie likely told herself that Bill was unstable, that he wasn't rich enough, that he wasn't fun enough, and that her children deserved the stability of her and Kurt. In her mind, she wasn't erasing a father, she was upgrading the family unit. But looking at the data, the divorce records, the timeline of the affair, the sudden changing of the locks, the admission of trauma from her own son, a darker silhouette emerges behind the bright lights. We see a woman who demands total control, a woman who cannot tolerate a competing narrative, a woman who, when she was done with her husband, didn't just divorce him, she deleted him. As we watch the Hawn-Hudson clan continue to dominate magazine covers, laughing and hugging and matching pajamas, we have to wonder what is real. Is that joy genuine? Almost certainly. They do love each other, but it is a joy that came at a cost. It is a joy that required a sacrifice, and that sacrifice was Bill Hudson. The darkness in Goldie Hawn's story isn't that she is an evil villain twirling a mustache. It is that she is a human being who wielded her immense power to curate her life exactly how she wanted it, regardless of the collateral damage. She wanted the fairy tale. And in Hollywood, if you want the fairy tale, sometimes you have to be the one to kill the wolf, even if the wolf is just a man who wants to see his kids. So the next time you see Goldie Hawn giggle on a talk show, telling a funny anecdote about her life with Kurt, look a little closer. Look past the sparkle in her eyes. Ask yourself, is that the smile of an innocent woman, or is it the smile of a victor who knows she got away with the perfect heist? She stole the narrative, she stole the children, and she got the world to applaud her for it. That takes a level of brilliance that goes beyond acting. That is the performance of a lifetime. And as the credits roll on this video, the question remains, do we really know Goldie Hawn at all?